So today we will discuss something about infections of the liver. Actually, I heard that medical class was hepatitis, so I thought both will be synergistic to one another, but unfortunately it couldn't take place. So now infections means I don't deal with hepatitis, but the surgical infections you can say. So the one that is important surgically is what is called as cholangitis. So what is cholangitis? Inflammation of the biliary radicals. So that is cholangitis. Of course, this cholangitis mainly comes whenever, as I told you already, whenever there is obstruction and stasis. So obstruction by mainly gallstones, that is called as choledocholithiasis. So choledocholithiasis or stricture of the CBD can result in obstructive jaundice and their stasis. So this suppurative cholangitis can ultimately lead to multiple liver abscesses also. So what are the features? Already we discussed about Charcot's triad. That is jaundice, fever with chills and rigors. That is very important. And there will be pain in the right hypochondrium and tender hepatomegaly. So this is, though it's a surgical infection, we call it as medical emergency because if this cholangitis is treatment is delayed, it will lead to septicemia and even organ failure. So should take it seriously as early as possible. We have to get rid of this. So how do we diagnose cholangitis? It is mainly by ultrasound, wherein the bile ducts are dilated, there is obstructive jaundice, and if you take blood culture in any fever with chills and rigors, if there are E. coli, then you have to think of cholangitis in this scenario. So what is the treatment? Of course, patient, because he may be vomiting also, dehydration, intravenous antibiotics, mainly cephalosporins, and first thing is, what is the cause? The cause is choledocholithiasis. So what we have to do is endoscopic removal of the stones you have to do. So once endoscopic removal is done, the obstruction is relieved and the patient will be having a drainage of the biliary tree. So the main treatment is removal of the stone. Suppose if it is due to stricture, then what you have to do is ERCP you have to do and then put a stent there. If you can pass through the stricture, you can put a stent in the CBD and then drain the bile so that the patient will be having relief. Then later you can treat the condition according to the is the stricture benign or malignant. If it is benign, you can do some surgery on the bile duct itself. But if it is malignant stricture, then you have to treat accordingly. Okay. So now let us go to the next one, that is pyogenic liver abscess. So pyogenic liver abscess is both acute and chronic, mostly idiopathic. You don't know the exact cause why particular patient develops pyogenic liver abscess. But it has increased incidence in elderly people, immunocompromised people, and diabetics also. So these three groups of individuals who should be careful whenever they complain of vague symptoms, like say anorexia, fever, malaise, right upper quadrant pain. So right hypochondrium, the patient complains of pain with all these things. In our country, we diagnose it as amoebic, but in most of the Western countries, it is due to pyogenic liver abscess. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it is not seen in India. It is seen in India also. So, what are the sources of infection? So, how infection can reach liver? These are the 5 routes. Commonest is through bile ducts. Just now we heard about cholangitis. So that is one route where it can, that is the common one. As I told you, cholelithiasis can block the CBD and then produce infection. That is the commonest route. Second is via hepatic artery. So whenever the patient is having any septicemia or pyemia, then the infection through the hepatic artery can reach the liver. So that is one route. Then you have portal vein. This is mainly due to infections in the region territory drained by portal vein. So the other day I was talking about pylophlebitis. So this is pylophlebitis due to appendicitis, any infection in that GIT. It will lead to pylophlebitis, and then even hemorrhoids as down as the last one. Hemorrhoids also, if they are infected, and if the sometimes the quacks will be doing unhygienic, unsterilized manner hemorrhoidectomy, then the infection can reach the liver. So these are the examples for pylophlebitis, okay, of which we have to remember about appendicitis and hemorrhoids. Then the other route is through umbilical vein. Of course, this is mainly in the newborn, and direct extension also. Sometimes the penetrating wounds will be reaching the liver, and then if that wound is infected, the liver wound also gets infected. So these are the 5 routes. So first thing is bile ducts through cholangitis. Another is hepatic artery. Next, portal vein. Then umbilicus and direct. So these are the routes how infection can reach liver. So acute abscess, usually they are multiple. These are all bacterial. Whenever we have not specified that it is amoebic, you have to take it as bacterial only. So bacterial, so usually acute abscesses are multiple, and the patient may be having other diseases also, like biliary or any other disease, abdominal infection also he can have. As I already told you, is malnourished, elderly, immunocompromised, or diabetic. Same symptoms: fever, lethargy, upper abdominal discomfort, and anorexia is one important feature. So we may confuse with the malignancies also sometimes, these abscesses, liver abscesses. And you don't find much signs. Only thing, the patient may or may not have hepatomegaly, tender hepatomegaly, may or may not have. So because of the proximity, there may be sympathetic pleural effusion also. So this is the acute abscess. You can see the level also. Why the upper one is dark? This is CT scan. So this is the liver, where of course there is another lesion also we are going to discuss today. Can anybody tell me what is this lesion? We are discussing this disease also today. Very good. 4-1-102. You are correct. It is hydatid cyst. and even for 4 also, yeah. And but it is calcified. That means it is inactive. It is no more active. It is inactive. It's an incidental finding, and this patient is having abscess with fluid level. Okay, fluid level. But why this is okay? Because of pus, the color is not 100% dark, whereas this is 100% dark. What is there here? This is pus. I am giving you tip that this is pus. Yeah, very good for it. Yes, air. It is air. So this air and fluid level in a solid organ is very dangerous. So this is because of air producing organisms, right? So you should be careful. These infections are very serious infections. Similarly, there may be chronic abscess also, and it is usually single, whereas acute is multiple, chronic is usually single. It is also called as cryptogenic abscess. So it will not have much symptoms uh, like acute abscess. Even acute abscess, except for fever and slight pain in the right hypochondrium, it is not having much symptoms. So similarly here also it is cryptogenic. So chronic abscess or cryptogenic liver abscess. Cause is unknown. So in acute abscess you have 5 roots, they can spread, but here you do not know from where it has come because the infection might have occurred long back and now liver abscess is occurring now, or it was present but we couldn't diagnose it. So same features, but they are not very fairly established. This fever, discomfort, all these things you will just say, no, you are not having anything. So, but indirect evidence is there is fall in albumin and anemia. So, with these cases, what you have to do is, main thing is you have to exclude tumors. Liver tumors, either primary or secondary, because as I told you, there will be anorexia, loss of appetite, discomfort, lethargy. All these things can also be there in hepatic malignancy or secondaries in the liver. So that's why any atypical clinical or radiological findings suspect necrotic neoplasm. So instead of diagnosing and or dubbing it as only infections of the liver, first exclude these neoplasms, then only proceed with the treatment of antibiotic. Okay, so liver tumors and liver infections sometimes may be, if the infection is still in solid state, not liquefied, then you may confuse it with the tumor. So that is very, very important. So that's why aspiration under guided aspiration is very, very important. So how do we diagnose? If there is a cystic mass, it's good. You can diagnose by ultrasound or CT. Confirmation must be by aspiration, which you will send the pus for culture and sensitivity. What are the organisms? As I told you, Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, and E. coli. These are the organisms which you have to treat. So what is the treatment? Again, same. If you are sure that it is an abscess, you can treat with antibiotic or guided aspiration. But one thing is, previously, during our house urgency, during our post-radiation, we used to drain without ultrasound guidance because we didn't have that facility at that time. Now, it will be a crime if you do without ultrasound, because unknowingly you have poked into the liver and then removed it after complete aspiration. Again, you try to poke it. You may poke it in the pleura, so thereby infecting the pleura. So it should be avoided. Like a blind aspiration should be avoided. Okay. Now let us go to amoebic liver abscess. This is most common in our parts. So it's also called as tropical abscess. In fact, 10% of world population is infected with amoeba. Of course, countries, underdeveloped countries, it would be even 50%, whereas well-developed countries, it may not be even 1 or 2%. Okay, so that is the prevalence of amoebiasis. As all of you know, it is due to Entamoeba histolytica. You can see the E system in the stool examination here. So males are more common because they, in Telugu we say nanagaddi tendam. So like that, men will eat anything. So that's why it is more common. And the other day I told you about the local Iraq, particularly in the north of this place, that is Tagarapalsa, where this Iraq is prepared, country-made liquor. It is made in strict septic conditions. So they'll be having a lot of infection, contamination. So they are more affected by this. So because when they are not having alcohol, they are even drinking sanitizers. So whatever that is available, they are drinking. Thereby, if it gets contaminated, they will have amoebic liver abscess. Okay. It is also called as amoeboma if it affects the cecum. So there may be a mass. The other day we were discussing about the right iliac fossa mass. So it is amoeboma. Fortunately, it is uncommon nowadays. So how does it spread to the liver? So before going to that, which part of the bowel amoebiasis affects? First, let me know which part of the bowel amoebiasis. What is the most prevalent site of amoebiasis? Just now I shown you cecum, so you are telling cecum. No, wrong. Answer is wrong. Colon, ileum, all are wrong. That's why I have not shown that slide. Jejunum, one person has given answer as jejunum. Absolutely wrong. Paracecal. How come paracecal? It cannot go out of the bowel wall, isn't it? It will penetrate the bowel wall and then enter the veins. So actually, amoebiasis, what is the common presentation? What is the common presentation of amoebiasis? This liver abscess is secondary. First presentation is amoebiasis, dysentery, good, 14. Where? Dysentery means which part of the bowel will produce dysentery? Yeah, even 44. Flask shape, all those are correct. You are good in parasitology and all, but rectum. One answer I got is 44, 40, rectum. Still better answer, yeah, 16 also. Still better answer. Rectum is correct, but still better answer is there. Sigmoid, 14. 140 now has arrived, correct. Rectosigmoid, yeah. So it is rectosigmoid region. That's why dysentery is common. Commonly we think it is right side colon, but it is wrong. It is left side colon. That's why amoebiasis you can diagnose by sigmoidoscopy, they say. Okay, so now let us go to this flow chart. So amoebiasis has reached the colon and then radical of mesenteric vein. So it will penetrate the bowel wall and then reach the mesenteric veins, from their portal vein. So the other day we were discussing upper posterior part of right lobe, that is the seventh segment, is the commonest involvement. So there it will colonize and then produce first solid lesion, then it gets liquefied, liquefaction necrosis will occur. Solitary abscess is very, very common in 70% of individuals. So this is the root, okay, how it spreads into the liver and why seventh segment is involved. So this all of you know, the characteristic pus is called as anchovy sauce. The other day we were discussing about this anchovy also. What is this anchovy and all? So it is chocolate colored. Why it has assumed chocolate color is because of its contents. Its contents are hepatocytes, that is the liver cells, WBC, RBC, even bile also sometimes. So whole thing gets chocolate color. So sometimes it may be green also because of excessive bile. Okay. So it is in 50% of cases, though we say amoebic liver abscess, it is infected secondarily by all these organisms. So that's why you may see mixed thing. Not only E. histolytica, you will see E. coli also, streptococci, staphylococcus. In rest of the things, if you culture, you will see only sterile pus because you cannot culture Amoeba histolytica that easily. So it will be sterile pus. But this is an academic point which all of you have to remember. In entrance, they may ask you the absolute diagnosis. See, we cannot say ultrasound is the diagnosis, CT scanning is the diagnosis for amoebic liver abscess. It is the demonstration of motile amoebae that is absolute diagnosis. In the last few drops of the pus, if you are lucky, or scrapings of the wall. So with needle you can scrape the abscess wall. You will feel that abscess wall also. When you become house surgeons, you will have chance to aspirate liver abscess. Then you will feel the abscess wall. Then you can scrape it, aspirate it, and then spread it on a slide. And you may demonstrate motile amoebae. This is the diagnosis of absolute indication that it is amoebic liver abscess. Okay. So what will happen to this amoebic liver abscess? Early stages, the other day I was telling you, amoebic hepatitis. The liver may be just palpable, tender, but if you don't treat with metronidazole, then it will lead to abscess formation. And this abscess can both get encapsulated and remain dormant, but usually what will happen is it will go untreated, and it may, though it is uncommon, it may burst into peritoneal cavity, it may burst in above through the diaphragm into the pleura, thereby producing amoebic empyema, or even into the lung also sometimes. So once it goes into the lungs, the chocolate colored sputum, this is the typical of amoebic lung abscess, then it may have a natural cure because the patient is coughing out all the contents of the pus, amoebic pus, so that he may get rid of it. But it has to be treated with metronidazole. And sometimes there may, as I told you, 50% there will be bacterial infection. So if it is solitary, the patient is lucky, it can be drained by conservative means. Whereas if it is multiple, carries poor prognosis because it may not respond that well because the metronidazole which you give may not reach the abscess cavities or patient is immunocompromised or something, then it's poor prognosis. So how do we diagnose? What are the clinical features of amoebiasis? Patient may give attack of amoebic dysentery. This is only seen in less than 50% of people. Most of them won't remember rather that they had amoebic dysentery. But the remaining persons can give you history that they had an episode of amoebic dysentery. And mainly the symptoms are very vague in the beginning. Early, again, like acute abscess or chronic bacterial abscess, there may be anemia, loss of weight. But this is very typical of amoebiasis, earthy complexion. Amoebic liver abscess, the patient's face, you can definitely see the difference between the normal color and this earthy complexion. Very typical. I have seen few patients with this earthy complexion. Pyrexia may be about 38. It will be more if there is infection, then secondary infection. Then it is associated with rigors also. There will be definitely night sweats like tuberculosis. Okay. So mainly vague symptoms, but ultimately they will land in pain in the right hypochondrium, which may be referred to shoulder if diaphragm is irritated. And the patient will catch hold like this liver. He will like this. He will come to OP. Once he is catching hold like that means he is supporting his liver. That means it is previously without seeing the patient who used to diagnose it as amoebic liver abscess. Then there may be same reason, hiccups may be there because of diaphragmatic irritation. Then there is tenderness, rigidity, and bulging of intercostal spaces like cholecystitis may be there. Any inflammation there will lead to all these things. Then hepatomegaly. The other day I was telling you may not be felt. Why? Because of this. See, here abscess is mainly above. So below enlargement is less. If at all there is any, liver may be just palpable and tender like this. So not only that, liver is prevented from moving down by what is called as perihepatitis. So diaphragm, the adventitia and the capsule of the liver get adherent to one another. So that's why it becomes immovable, and there is perihepatitis. Sometimes you may even hear a hepatic rub also here. If you put a stent here, there may be hepatic rub. As I already told you, because it of close proximity to the right lung, there may be pleural effusion, there may be basal pneumonitis also. See here. So this is very typical of amoebic liver abscess. Then how do we diagnose? So anemia, raised ESR, leukocytosis, stool examination, already I have shown you. This cysts are there. So, but not able to demonstrate cysts doesn't exclude amoebic liver abscess. This is very, very important. So liver function tests may not be much helpful, but there is definitely elevated alkaline phosphatase. So these are all indirect evidence. And similarly, serological tests we used to do previously like ELISA, complement fixation, immunofluorescence. immunoelectrophoresis, hemagglutination, all these tests are there now of academic interest. They are there, can be done, and similarly sigmoidoscopy, as I told you. So as somebody has pointed out, flask-shaped ulcers or collar stud ulcers will be there in the rectosigmoid. Okay, you can even see the trophozoites there. So, but the characteristic diagnosis is by ultrasound. Ultrasound will show you hypoechoic or anechoic lesions, and guided aspiration will not only confirm, because you will aspirate the chocolate colored pus, and it will be therapeutic also. So once you are sure that it is amoebic liver abscess, you can aspirate it by ultrasound guidance. Similarly, whenever CT, because if it's still in necrotic stage, it is not yet liquefied, then as I told you, you have to differentiate it from carcinoma. So then you have to do CT scan also. So raised diaphragm, already I shown you how raised diaphragm will be there. So raised diaphragm is very typical of amoebic liver abscess. So there may be pleural effusion, all those things will be there. So this is, see, you can see, barely see. You are unable to see the border also very clearly. That is because it is still in evolving stage. So at this stage, it is very difficult to diagnose from a necrotic tumor. So you should be very careful. Of course, if it is completely liquefied like this in CT scan, you can see this amoebic liver abscess. So don't confuse this with cyst, because cyst will be completely dark, whereas here it is not dark. Okay, pus will not be dark 100%. So what is the treatment? Medical treatment. Medical treatment is with metronidazole or tinidazole, because metronidazole gives that metallic taste. Even tinidazole does give. So can anybody tell me, apart from these two, is there any other drug for amoebiasis? Apart from metronidazole, tinidazole, I have purposefully not included that, so that I wanted to give a chance to you. You might not have heard about it. Quinine, very good. One is chloroquine, thermomycin, yeah. These are all the drugs in olden days we used to give. Diloxanate furoate is not mainly for cis, yeah. These are all the drugs. And one another imidazole group is there. It is actually single dose imidazole. So you are strong in pharmacology, I am happy. But what about that another imidazole drug? That is, okay, it is, saconazole. It is a single dose drug, 2 grams statum you can take, but whether it can be used for amoebic liver abscess, I am doubtful. For amoebiasis or suspected amoebiasis, as a single dose, it can be taken. The metallic taste is less because it is single dose, whereas these you have to give continuously to 1 to 2 weeks. You have to give. Now, usually, whenever there is amoebiasis and amoebic liver abscess, we usually give IV metronidazole. What is the dose of IV metronidazole? Just now I said you are all good in pharmacology. Let me test IV metronidazole. What is the dose? Yeah, you should know the preparations. What you have given is tablets. So only 143 has given correct answer. Rest you have given the tablets dose. Metronidazole is available as 400 milligram tablets, and the dose is correct, 800 milligrams you have to give. That is not simple OD dose, it is TID dose. Whereas the IV preparation is available as 500 milligrams per 100 ml. That is the dose which we give IV for 1 week minimum, and sometimes even 2 weeks. But aspiration also has got role, because size of the abscess is very important. If it is less than 6 to 10 centimeters, you can give metronidazole alone. But if it is more than 6 to 10 centimeters, or whenever you expect rupture of the cyst, if it is enlarging, you are following with ultrasound, it is enlarging enormously, then you have to interfere by aspiration. So aspiration, I already told you, by guided aspiration you have to do. Surgery very rarely we attempt. Whenever there is peritoneal rupture, we have to open the abdomen and then don't meddle with the abscess cavity. If you meddle with abscess cavity, what will happen is there is a lot of bleeding. So simply, what are the principles of surgical treatment? Whenever there is rupture into the peritoneal cavity, is resuscitate the patient, drain the pus, give lavage only, nothing more than that, and follow with medical treatment. Medical treatment is the sheet anchor. Then the only indication for surgery in amoebic liver abscess is ruptured amoebic liver abscess. So it will cause peritonitis. So you have to do peritoneal lavage only. That's all. Have to you drain the pus by aspiration, opening the abdomen. You will aspirate the pus, drain it by like that, and then give peritoneal lavage. Put a drain and then come out. Previously, we used to fear draining or putting a catheter into the liver. Can you tell me the reason why we were afraid previously? Why we were not putting a drain into the liver and bringing it out? Drain means previously we used to put corrugated rubber sheet or corrugated polyvinyl sheet. Now we are putting tubes, but previously we used to put these corrugated drains. Why we were afraid to put a drain from liver to outside in a case of amoebic liver abscess? Of course, it is old-timers question, so you may not be remembering it. We used to fear that, yeah, I got the answer. Spread of infection where? You are correct. Infection only, both 2.6 and 4.4. You said spread of infection from where to where? That is important. So from liver to the skin, we used to call it as external only. So it is called as so involvement of the skin is called as amoebiasis cutis. So that's why we used to fear And then we never drained like that. We never put a drain. But now that fear is not there with the introduction of metronidazole. The whole scenario has changed. So we can drain the abscess like that. Okay, now let us go to the other infection. Actually, we are not supposed to call them infections, but infestations. So highlight it. Can you tell me, apart from Mediterranean, in our place, in our state or combined state, where is it common? In which region of combined AP it is common? Of course, it is seen here also, particularly in tribal patients. But one particular region in our state is very commonly seen. Very good. 143. It is Rayalaseema. Correct. Kurnool, you just name the organ, it would be present there. Huh? Yeah. Kurnool, 9-2. You are correct. So in Kurnool, this is very Kurnool district and Rayalaseema as a whole, it is very common. This because of the peculiar food habits, and so all of you be careful with this creature or animal, which most of you, being ladies or girls, you love this animal particularly. So more than males, I don't know why. So both my daughters, they are very fond of this animal. I am deadly against this fellow. So whatever it is, I don't have, of course, for your information. So what is this animal? What host is this animal? In hydatid cyst disease, this is what host? Yes. I didn't ask you what is that animal. Some of you have answered what is that animal, but most of you have given the answer. Yeah, good. So 44122 and 140 also have given. It is definitive host. Good. Somebody has answered it as intermediate host. It is wrong. So definitive host. Dog is the definitive host. That's why it is called as dog tapeworm. Echinococcus granulosus. There are still more organisms like multilocularis, all those things, but don't bother about them. In entrance, they will give you this Echinococcus granulosus. Don't confuse with E and E. Amoebiasis is entamoeba, this is Echinococcus. Okay? Dog tapeworm. Whereas these other animals like cows, sheep, all these things are intermediate hosts. But suddenly man is appearing here. What is his role? What is he? Man. Yes, correct. 4144. 106. 26. So it is accidental intermediate host. You need not say accidental intermediate host. Yeah, 48 also. So it is accidental host because in the life cycle of this tapeworm, man is nowhere. But because of our, just now I told you, of close proximity to dogs. If dog is not kept in hygienic way, or if you behave unhygienically, what will happen is through dog feces, it can be ingested by man accidentally. Whereas these animals, poor animals, they will be eating the grass that is contaminated with this cyst. So, once man is entered, or even any other animal, it is the liver. Again, same thing through this portal vein only, it will reach the liver, and there consists of liver is the most common organ to be involved, because from intestines it is enterohepatic circulation, it will reach the liver, but doesn't mean that it is the only organ. It may be lung, the second common, spleen, any other. As I told you in Kurnool, if you want to see peculiar organs, peculiar places where this hydatid cyst can reside, you will be wondering. So this cyst, so-called cyst, is having 3 layers. So the outer one is called as outermost, is called as pericyst. So it is formed by host tissue, compressed host tissue, also called as adventitia. And it is part of the liver, that's why it is not separable from liver. So when you do surgery, you keep this layer behind. That means it belongs to the patient. So it has to be with the patient. If you try to separate it, this also, it will bleed like hell. So should not do that. Then second layer or intermediate layer or hyaline membrane or laminated membrane, so many names for this. Ectocyst is the other name. So hyaline membrane, laminated membrane, or ectocyst. This is formed by the parasite, and it is whitish and elastic. It peels readily from pericyst. That is what we will exploit. We will try to remove it from the pericyst. Okay, if you want to do cystectomy. Then the innermost layer, or also called as endocyst, also called as germinal membrane. So that is laminated, this is germinal. This is actually the living part of hydatid cyst. This is the living part. It is a single layer cells. It secretes inside hydatid fluid, outside the ectocyst or laminated membrane. So this is the cyst. So this grayish one is the adventitia formed by the host reaction. The greenish one is called as laminated membrane. Actually, it may not be greenish. If it is bile stained, then it will be greenish. Otherwise, it may be whitish one. Then inside there is hydatid fluid, in which there are these daughter cysts, also called as brood capsule. So brood capsule, if it is attached to this membrane, it is called as brood capsule. If it is separated like this, it is called as daughter cyst. So this whole thing will give this what is called as the granular appearance or sand-like appearance in the inside the cyst. Okay, so these are the 3 layers: adventitia or pericyst, laminated membrane or ectocyst, germinal membrane or endocyst, also called as the the, the living part of the hydatid cyst. Okay. Now, of course, WHO has classified this into 3 groups. The cysts, one is active, another is transition, next is inactive. The one which you have seen, see here, in this, what happened to that? Oh. So, this one is inactive, okay? It is already calcified. So active is any cyst that is larger than 2 centimeters and it is often fertile. If you touch it, it will land in other places also. Whereas transition is that one that is become inactive. The cyst, because of host resistance, will degenerate, or you have given treatment, and but it may contain viable protostosis. Whereas inactive is, so totally calcified cysts may be there, partially degenerated, all those things will be there. It will not contain viable protostosis. So nothing, you can leave it like that at this stage. Okay, these are the 3 groups, group 1, 2 and 3. So what is the course of the disease? Most of the patients remain asymptomatic. It may be an incidental finding like that. It may be an incidental finding. Or those patients, the cysts may enlarge and then the patient will come with a lumpectomy. Mainly they will come with lumpectomy. It may attain huge proportions. So dull aching pain will be there. And if the disease, if the parasite dies, then as I told you, it may be calcified walls or bile stain membrane will be remaining, but it is encapsulated. So usually the course is either asymptomatic or active enlargement we are obtaining huge proportions. So what are the complications of this hydatid cyst? It can press upon the bile ducts, thereby producing obstructive jaundice. Sometimes even the cyst can enter the bile ducts and then thereby producing a lot of trouble. It is called as miliary hydatid cyst. Everywhere there are cysts in the body. It can rupture into the peritoneal cavity or into the bowel because duodenum is close by. So, or as I said, into the bile ducts or into the pleura, and there it will establish again secondary infestation. Peritoneal hydatidosis, it is very, very difficult to treat. Similarly, biliary, how many number you can remove? So that is also very difficult. Pleural cavity, of course, it can produce there also. Another complication is if it ruptures, it may produce anaphylactic shock also. And sometimes it may get infected, then that may be the natural treatment, natural course. So that if you give antibiotics, that is the end of the matter. So sometimes it may get infected secondarily also. But rupture is the dangerous complication of hydatid cyst, apart from jaundice, and shock also is there. So how do you diagnose? Ultrasound, multiloculated cyst will be there, and that multiloculation on CT scan is called as cartwheel appearance. So sometimes even floating membrane can also be seen in this cyst. Of Of course, these previously we used to say Cassoni's test. Nobody does it now. ELISA also not very commonly done now. But one thing is eosinophily will be there because of allergy. So the other day I was talking about aspiration, absolute contraindication. So hydatidosis is almost a relatively absolute contraindication for aspiration, because if you try to aspirate, not only it may lead to anaphylactic shock, it may spread to other regions. So always never attempt to liver biopsy or aspirate in case of suspected hydatidosis. Okay. Mainly it is dependent on imaging, ultrasound or CT. So this is the ultrasound picture. You can see multiple cysts here, better seen here, multi-loculated cyst. This is well seen on CT scan like this. So this is the cart wheel. So inside one and then spokes of the cart wheel. So this is cart wheel appearance on CT scan. Then of course there may be floating membrane like this. Also, this is very typical of this hydatid cyst. Then of course it may be within the CBD also. See, this is CBD that is blocked by this, and these are the daughter cysts, multiple daughter cysts are there. So this is typical hydatid cyst. So what is the treatment? Of course, if it is inactive, don't bother about it. And also number of cysts is very important. Usually it is single, but if it is multiple, like in multilocularis and other things, other infestations, then it is very dangerous condition. Anatomical position is also important. If it is impinging on hepatic vein or something major structure, very difficult to treat these patients. So usually asymptomatic and inactive cysts are left alone. Whereas those which you think they are active but not very big in size, what you can give is albendazole. What is the dose of albendazole as far as hydatid cyst is concerned? At least for worm infestation, what is the dose? If you can tell me that, then we will think of hydatid cyst. Yeah, 400 milligrams is not the dose. It is the strength of the tablet. I am glad that you remember the strength of the tablet. But what is the dose of albendazole in, say, roundworm infestation? 40. Somebody has given answer 40. 40 is absolutely wrong. 10 times you have given less. 10 milligrams per kg per day. Good. 92143. That is for what? That is for what? What infestation? Is 10 milligram per kg. For what infestation it is given? Actually, it is 10 to 12 milligrams per kg. So, without much delay, let me complete this. If it is, yeah, Ascaris only, but how many days you have not written? For how many days it is given? So, let me complete that before wasting much of the time. If it is any other worms, it is, yeah, this 1 month is for what? Even 1 month is wrong. So let me complete. So it is single dose for most of the worms. It is single dose. Say for not amoebiasis, this ascariasis. Whereas for hydatid disease, It is BD dose, that is 400 milligrams BD. That comes to roughly 12 milligrams per kg per day in divided doses, BD dose. It is available as 400 milligrams. So you have to give BD, or at least, depending upon the weight of the patient, at least one tablet per day continuously for 3 to 6 months. Then only it will somewhat regress in size. Okay. So full course means 3 months minimum. Minimum is 3 months. And per day it may be either single or BD dose of albendazole. Okay. So sometimes the cyst is so big that you are afraid it may not regress in size with your treatment. So what you can do is a sandwich type. First you will give albendazole for few weeks. Once you ensure that the cyst is a bit regressing, then what you can do is what is called as PAIR. PAIR is puncture, aspiration, injection, and reaspiration. So first puncture with a needle, a thick needle, aspirate the contents. But as I told you, it may be having anaphylactic reaction as a reaction. So you have to be ready with all emergency drugs. And then once you aspirate, and you should not leave it empty. So again, you have to inject scolicidal agents. What are these scolicidal agents? Hypertonic saline, 15 to 20% of normal. Normal saline is only 0.9%, whereas hypertonic saline, 20% maximum. Ethanol, povidone iodine, anything you can inject 1%. So this you will inject into the cyst. Of course, not how much amount you have removed. Suppose let us say you have removed some 50 ml. You should not inject 50 ml of this. Inject only less amount and then re-aspirate it. What you have injected, you have to re-aspirate. Otherwise, that will itself become secondarily infected. So puncture, aspiration, injection, and re-aspiration. That is called as PAIR. So this PAIR you can try, but even it may fail. Then what you do is you have to do total excision or pericystectomy. It's called as pericystectomy because you are removing this thing, and then because you will be leaving a raw surface, you have to pack it with omentum. That's why it is called as omentoplasty. Sometimes it may result in hepatic segmentectomy. That segment you can remove if it is in the periphery. If it is inside, you cannot do it. Better you do this pericystectomy with omentoplasty. So then nowadays people are doing laparoscopy also for hyoid cysts. So these are the scolicidal agents already I have told. Okay. So that's about today's class. Hope you understood that. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. So I'm not having any doubts. Okay, it's a good sign.